Hello. It's nice that microphone is working, and it is really my pleasure to welcome all of you here on the stage. I know that we are the last ones to talk about our issues, and I know that everyone is actually eager to leave, so we will try to make it quick and short, concise, precise, and otherwise attractive. But still, there are some issues which we would like to discuss. So as you could see previously, we are very much involved in this Čákava bypass project. And in fact, it is one of the first PPP projects in road infrastructure in Baltics. And during this process, we as a consultants have seen how much time it takes not only to prepare documents, not only to come up with some solutions, to think of technical requirements and valuation criteria, but how much time it takes actually to educate everyone around, to educate private partners, to educate public partners, institutions, to lead negotiations, to help our clients and to help our public institutions to step out of their comfort zone, to open their minds, and actually to be ready for these projects. So as I said at the very outset, Latvian State's roads happen to be very constructive and very brave clients at one and the same time. And so we really appreciate that. What we would appreciate is that there were more projects coming. There was a pipeline of projects. And to have this pipeline, actually, Latvian state roads have another project being realized and being put together already. So there will be road PPP projects soon announced next year, hopefully next year. But we would like to see PPP projects also in other sectors, not just road. And what is our perception is here is that public institutions, even though they are interested in this solution, they are not prepared to step out of the comfort zone and to tell the whole story. Why do they need these projects? How to implement them? Why to implement them? And to explain to the wider public why is it important? Why is it reasonable to pay a bit higher price for a longer period of time and have some other benefits from this structure? So when putting together this story, we as a consultants are being trained to tell stories. And when putting together a story, it is important that you first identify who are the main subjects of the story. And now here in the panel, we have gathered very successfully representatives of all main issues which actually go under the PPP project. So we have representative Talis, who represents public side, public authority side in general. We have Elena, who represents EBRD as institutional financier. We have Pierre-Antoine here, and he represents Vinci. So he represents company which is able to come and construct around and maintain it. And we also have Christina here, who is a lawyer participating in structuring of this PPP project. So she has, from the public side, this first hands-on approach and hands-on feeling on how it is to go through this process. So to tell this whole story, I would actually ask you all to give your first comments. What is your feeling? Why do we lack this active and big number of PPP project pipeline? And also, what are your feelings, how you could contribute to actually expand this number? So Talis, can we start with you?
Hello everyone, and good to see you all here today, still in a quite large number. I was named as one of the issues dealing with such infrastructure projects. And yes, you actually quite rightly pointed out that in the public sector, there are a number of obstacles or reasons why something new, and for Latvia, PPPs is something new still, unfortunately. Something new has not happened or is happening in a very slow pace. And the reason probably is that we are very smart in calculating impact of the project decisions on the territories, on the economic development and so on, and on environment, but we are not calculating what is the cost of not making decision. Not making decision, not making the correct policy for making decisions, not gathering the required capacity for making decisions, not gathering required knowledge. And unfortunately, it has happened with PPPs in a way that we know in Latvia one very nice example, which is Dienvidu Bridge in Riga, which everyone had opinion about it, and in a public perception it has the meaning of Golden Bridge and so on. And one such example has scared away politicians from making decisions about PPPs for a very long time. Another issue, of course, is the leadership, political leadership, visions, visionary thinking of what we would like to achieve in a public policy, what in a specific sector, for example, in the road sector, what is our ideal structure of roads, how we can have a long-term strategy towards this vision, what are our priorities, and how we are going to achieve it. The planning of funding, the planning of finances. There is no secret that in Latvia we have shortage of funding in relation to roads, and according to some calculations it's approximately 3.4 billion euros which is missing. And of course there are no miracles how to find such amount of money, especially if we have also other sectors in a great need, and we have social issues and healthcare and so on. And in this respect, the need for priorities, for clear concentration resources, being effective with these resources that you have, that's something which is missing. So my introductory comment would be that we the things which have been done so far with a particular PPP project, Čekava bypass, it's already a big achievement. But once we have results, positive results of the first such PPP, it would give real boost in developing next and the next. Thank you.
Actually, before we go further, I have just one thing to add here, is that we haven't yet announced Čekava bypass project, but we have been given public presentations on it for a year and a half already. And what we received back just a month ago is that 3 things which are publicly known from this project are already exported to some other PPP projects in Europe. So they have considered our experience and our solutions worth exportation. So this is actually one of the things which we see, that even without reaching result, you already have something to share which is positive, and you already have like a threshold set that this is actually something which we can achieve even here in Baltics with the first project.
As a BRD, as in international financial institutions, we support public-private partnerships quite enthusiastically because the previous precedents, the studies have shown that despite the initial complexity at the preparation stage, the potential benefits of implementing infrastructure projects via public-private partnerships brings also a significant potential benefit. So, for example, there is a larger percentage of the assets that have been completed on time and budget. There is also such benefits for government as so to say, reliable, predictable cash flows. There is no need to spend resources on subsequent maintenance. There is no to spend resources of subsequent assessments of the funds needed. So generally, the PPP model is considered beneficial for the ultimately beneficial for the public sector. And what we quite often notice that it's quite important just to initiate a PPP program. So, for example, once first project has been done, first financial closing has been achieved, then it's much easier to progress with next ones. So, for example, we had quite successful PPP program in Hungary, which was lasted from 90s, and there were quite a few road sections completed under public-private partnerships, and there were other infrastructure assets that were constructed under public-private PPP model. Yes, and also I would say that EBRD, again, in order to promote PPP model to the governments, we have also a special department called Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility, which includes panel of consultants that reputable international consultant that can be mobilized quickly and support governments in the structuring of the transaction. So that's probably as an initial comment.
Yeah, okay. Pierre, would you?
Yes, hello everyone, I'm Pierre-Antoine, I represent Vinci Highways, which is a road concessionaire, which means that we act both as a private investor and also we do manage the construction works and the operation and maintenance works. So we sign those PPP contracts which have a long duration, 20, 25 years. Some of them have even exceeded 50 years. And we have a broad experience now in the world and especially in Europe. And we have even last year closed our first concession contract in the UK. So we have handed it over to the government. And we have experienced the handbag requirements you were mentioning in your initial presentation. We have experience in countries and on projects which were the first of their kinds as PPPs. That's the case in Slovakia, for instance. And what I wanted to mention maybe as an introductory comment regarding the difficulty and maybe the complexity to prepare a PPP project is that it is, I think, essential to keep a pragmatic and realistic view of the risk and the transfer of risk we want to put in a PPP project to be able to interest the private parties, the private investors, and also to be bankable. So the level of risk should be adapted to what the private investors can do and are willing to do, and what the risks that the lenders are willing to accept too. And and that may seem not very concrete, but very practically, that means, for instance, that launching a road project with traffic risk in a country which has not tested a PPP or a concession is something which is not realistic and which will very difficultly reach financial close. Even if we manage to put in place some traffic guarantees or other types of guarantees on the debt. So typically, an availability-based model would be the best option for first road PPP in a country, and this is what has been done, for instance, in Norway 15 years ago when they launched their first wave of PPP. This is what has been done in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, also in Germany with the A models, which is nothing else than an availability model. The second important point is that some visibility in the long term should be given, and I would like to reinstate that pipeline point. Potential bidders, potential investors would invest, and not money but time, ahead of the project, even more if they know that there are a portfolio of opportunities available in the next couple of years, in the next 10 years. And again, giving additional examples, this is what happened in Slovakia, where 2 successive PPP deals have been procured in the road sector. First the R1, and then another project near Prague. This is what has happened also in Norway, where 15 years ago 3 PPPs were successively tendered during 3 years. And Norway last year has relaunched a new wave of 3 additional PPPs, announced together as a package over a duration of 3 or 4 years. So that gives a lot of comfort. It increases the appetite of the private investors and the lenders, and it also allows a quick improvement of and a quick learning curve of all the actors involved in the PPP deals. All that community that works also with the private sector, but also with the public sector. And for instance, here I'm thinking about all the legal advisory consultancies, the technical engineers who perform lender technical advisory services. I'm also thinking of the financial advisors, even the local banks, the commercial banks, which need to, when it comes to PPP, to maybe slightly adjust the way they perceive risk, going to longer tenors, longer maturities, for deals that can go up to 20 or 25 years, which is sometimes something they are not used to do. So building that momentum in a perspective of a pipeline of project is really a good mechanism to grow knowledge overall in a country, benefiting from international experience.
Today we heard both sides. Just now, like we heard the private side, the private investors who are just confirming that they are ready for the PPPs, they are waiting for the PPPs. On the other hand, we heard about the public side expressing some kinds of fears, maybe lack of competence, maybe lack of experience. What we have understood is that if you don't start doing that, you will never get this experience, you will never get this confidence. We do realize that we do not have this competence yet, but on the other side, this competence exists in Europe in the form of consulting companies, international consulting companies, who are ready to guide and help. It's just like if you want to learn skiing, you take the skis, you go to the hill, you take instructor and start doing it. Okay, you will fall, most probably, and most probably we will get some mistakes and errors as well, but we will become much stronger and much more determined. I'm absolutely sure about that, and that's our strategy now. And yes, it's a teamwork, and what we did, we got basing on the decision of the Minister Cabinet about starting Tjakova bypass PPP. We made up our project group consisting of 4 people, an engineer, a lawyer, project manager, and project coordinator who is also doing EU funding things. So, and then we were smart enough to find a very, very good consulting company providing this financial and legal competence. So it's quite simple on the one hand. On the other hand, the results, the things we are doing are quite complicated. But we are gaining this confidence and competence, and we are sure that we will be able and stronger to launch the next PPP, just like colleagues said that they are expecting a bunch of PPPs going at the same time, which is attractive for the private sector. So.
Yeah, so to proceed, actually, when I started my presentation previously, I said that PPP is one of the sustainable financing aspects and solutions. And I said it on purpose because one of the comments we actually plan to make here is that we were having a Deloitte internal workshop on how we could actually find some overlapping issues in sustainable financing, in politics, and in implementation of long-term sustainability projects. And so we had a really interesting workshop, and one of the conclusions which we had was that circular economy seems to be one of the reasons, actually one of the largest frameworks which helps actually to explain PPP projects and other long-term projects. It helps to explain their validity, the need for them, etc. But what we lack is consistency in the politics. And so previously, Talis most probably was not here, but we had a very interesting panel discussion here before today about political risks in implementation of long-term projects. And so one of the conclusions of our workshop was that politics as always is a bit of lagging behind Europe, and we are lagging behind in several aspects. So circular economy comes to our minds. We are one of the last ones to think about it. So sustainable financing, also we are one of the last ones to jump on the train, which is actually still can be seen, but soon we will not be able to see it. But there is one thing in which all of the trains have left. But fortunately, not only for Baltics, but also for Europe. So this train has left for politicians. Sorry, Talis, it's not personally to you. Don't get no offenses, please. But our actually result of the workshop was that we would appreciate having politicians who are actually respecting these initiatives, which are long-term, and not coming each 4 years with promises that we will make reform of anything which was done before and start a new page, go forward, then again 4-year period, we delete everything, we destroy everything, so we put something new on the place. So there are some long-term initiatives, and if they are explained and presented through this lens of circular economy and sustainability, then actually we would appreciate that politicians started their political campaigns with not that they are going to destroy something or terminate something or get rid of something, but we would appreciate that they were actually building on the level of awareness of our society, saying that there was something good they started, but it was maybe not so good, and I will come and improve it, but I will continue it. So this is an option for long-term projects to survive elections. And again, Talis, it's not against you personally. So I have my next question to all of you, that whenever we are telling stories, we are usually making emphasis that to get courage for someone, it means that there is some fear to overcome. So the fear in this situation is that PPP is associated mostly with something which is very complicated, which is very long, which requires consultants to be engaged. So you certainly cannot do it on your own. So it's not just a project you can put on the paper overnight. But again, we have these positive signals, we have these positive examples, and I think that we all have a comment to make in that perspective, that there is a reason to step out of the comfort zone, to look at the positive examples, and to go forward. So could you please comment from this side on the PPPs?
Okay, I'll try. I think what is important, again, it would be just good to base any statements on the examples. And we had a few countries who have done their PPPs, their first PPPs, their second PPPs, progressed to secondary markets. For example, the first public-private partnership in Slovakia was subsequently refinanced through the bond structure. In Hungary, a few years ago, also there was a change in shareholding structures for the two main concession companies. We also see that more countries do their pilot public-private partnerships. So Turkey has recently completed the Eurasia Tunnel project. In other infrastructure sectors, there is always, in some countries, there is always something going on. And we usually have a successful track record of it. And I think that's something that goes to show that yeah, it just needs to be unlocked. The first project needs to go through, and it will just get easier.
Yes, maybe one additional point. We feel there is no lack of financing. Actually, this is not the issue. We, as private investors, have money to invest. Also, the financiers have money available, either through loans or bonds. In parallel to that, we see the infrastructure gap, which is big in Europe. There are still huge needs of investment, not only on new greenfield projects, but also on rehabilitation needs. I'm talking about the road sector, but it's also true for other infrastructure projects. So we think that PPPs are a very good tool to match those two needs. I mean, the availability of money on the one side and the infrastructure gap on the other side, and that it's a good way also to accelerate the investment. And maybe taking also, so the issue actually is that there is a lack of good projects available in Europe for investments to be made. And by good project, I mean projects which have an appropriate level of risk, an appropriate level of investment returns. Because sometimes we see projects which could be viable because they have a high level of traffics. So that could, through concession model, be used to finance the construction works or the rehabilitation works. But traffic risk in a country which has not tested PPP may be seen still as too risky, and then the contracting authority, the public authority or the government says, okay, I'm not going there because it's not going to work. So maybe first step is to test the PPP, and then go and find those good projects which have potential, which have traffic, which have economic value, and work with the European institutions or with the public domestic institution to put here some sort of guarantee that that can then incentivize the private investors to take that marginal higher risk that they have not taken on the first project. But now that they have the confidence, that they feel supported, that they know the client, the authority is reliable and delivers, then that can happen. So that's the second step that, that we've seen materialize, for instance, in France and also in Spain, and I would say also in Greece. And the second point, talking about Greece, and a second aspect of the concession contracts is also their resilience. We had signed two of our major road concession motorways in Greece before the financial crisis, had financed them. And during the crisis, we've been able, in collaboration with the Greek government, by adjusting some tariffs, by restructuring a part of the debt, to maintain this contract alive, to keep maintaining the infrastructure, to keep servicing the motorists on the highway. And these have proved of significant importance to the Greek economy, because if the highways had not been maintained, that would have created a big backlog in the financial statements of the Greek government, even more than if the concessions wouldn't have remained in place. So those would be, yes, that would be again, the resilience of the concession contract would be another point to be highlighted here.
From the public side, and I have to note that still for 3 weeks I'm not yet a politician, so I can speak more directly for 3 weeks. Afterwards, these wishy-washy statements will come. But looking at the situation with PPPs, one issue again with the public administration is being scared of failure in the first case. And with PPPs, it's very, how to say, tricky to divide the risks between private partner and the public partner. And you can fail in both ways. You can create very favorable conditions for the private contractor, and then public perception is that this is too generous, and again you can create such terms that there is no one who is applying for such a PPP project, and then you fail from that perspective. And therefore it's very good that we today hear positive examples, and there is knowledge, and knowledge is with us to share these examples and to find all the details about them. And the second issue is when once it has been done, then you have created kind of a competence center, not only with the consultants, but also in the public side. And what has been lacking a bit in Latvia is that there is no such a public advocate for PPP projects. It was just initiative of state road administration and probably some very dedicated people, but not the institution whose task is to promote PPPs as a way how to fund the public infrastructure.
Just one final thing. I just caught up myself thinking that I become a bit like irritated when I hear people saying that, do we need PPPs, do we not need PPPs? I want to say, okay, do we have other options? Or do we not live in the time when PPPs are all around us? So it means that they are coming to the Baltic states sooner or later. So maybe just our task is to speed up the time, get the competence, and do qualitative PPPs. It's not really an issue of having or not having. It's there, just we have to go in pace with the time, that's it, and the options.
Yeah, so I think that we are very close to running out of time, and we will close very soon. Just final remark from my side is that being not afraid is one thing. Another thing is being transparent, being available, and being explanatory to anyone who asks the questions. And actually to be very modest in your attitude whenever you are explaining this quite a complex issue to someone who is not familiar with it. And modesty is required simply not to scare someone away. So if a person had an interest to ask a question, it means that there is at least some percentage of probability that he would go forward with it. So we should be very actually tolerant to this wish, and we simply have to help it grow and turn into a real possibility. So this is one of the things which we represent in our work together with Latvian State Roads. We have been very open to the society during this 1.5 years. We have had 2 open days for the project, but otherwise we have already participated in several conferences and several networking events. We still keep being very available and open. And actually, I can honestly say that during this 1.5 years, we have received several questions about possibility to help another PPP projects, not in the road sectors, but in other sectors. And even with this very modest approach in explaining the project, we are still seeing this fear in the eyes of persons being actually involved in the process. So we know that we have to educate, we know that we have to be modest, but we have to be very simple at the same time. And we have to be not simply simple, but we have to be like someone who is trusted for the advice given. So it is quite a complex playing field for us. We are learning how to go through it. But I think that very soon we will be able to say that it was worth, and it was the first positive example which we have. So I would thank organizers for having this conference, and it was very nicely organized, and we are really appreciating the chance to be here. I really appreciate the presence of all you who are here and for your comments. And once more, I would actually like to encourage everyone to be very open, and you are actually listening to some new ideas. So thank you all for your attention.